The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business podcast.
Hello, everybody. This is Jeff Baer, Community Relations Coordinator, Copa Health in Mesa. We're here this morning at the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, and our podcast for today is on neuroplasticity. We have with us Tessa Christensen, a recent graduate from Northern Arizona University, who's going to talk to us about this interesting subject that has so much to do with mental health. So, good morning, Tessa. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good morning. Yes. During my time at Northern Arizona University, I became increasingly aware throughout my college education about how mental health is oriented in our society. I graduated with a degree in sociology and criminal justice, and so understanding how involved mental health is throughout our communities, especially the criminal justice system, is something I'm extremely passionate about, and neuroplasticity is one of the things that I feel we all practice in our everyday lives, but understanding the influence of it is something I want to describe in this podcast today.
And our goal today in this podcast is to give our listeners an understanding of this and how it may relate to better health, better mental health. So let's begin by tell us, what is neuroplasticity?
Yeah, absolutely. Neuroplasticity, or brain plasticity, is a term that describes the brain's ability to adapt throughout our lifetime. When we expose our brain to different routines, neural connections are formed throughout the neurons or nerve cells within the brain. This is possible because the brain is not static, and new activity forces the brain to create new connections, strengthening existing neurons and also generating new ones. This is due to the enhancement of our neurons, which are fundamental elements of our nervous system that affect our interactions throughout daily life. When we expose ourselves to new things and continue to expose ourselves to the new practices, our brain is able to form new connections between the neurons in our brain, promoting neuroplasticity.
So, Tessa, are there different ways that neuroplasticity occurs in the brain?
Absolutely. The two types that are oriented in neuroplasticity are structural and functional, and based on the type of learning process that occurs within the brain at the time. Structural plasticity involves the growth of new neurons or formation of new connections and the physical changes to the brain structure. This can be understood as the formation of new neurons through learning, experiences, and environmental changes. An example of this would be when you are participating in a new experience that you've never done before, or you're doing an experience in a different way. Your brain is adapting and responding in ways that it's not accustomed to, creating new neural pathways that may influence a person's response to learning and memory. Functional plasticity takes place when the brain undergoes an injury or trauma occurs to the brain in some regard, and certain brain functions may become lost from that trauma. And neuroplasticity allows for new neurons from parts of the brain that weren't harmed to have the ability to shift into the damaged areas, and those neurons that are transferring are able to compensate for what was lost during some form of brain injury. And an example of this would be like participating in speech or physical therapy to improve motor functions and specific deficits that may have occurred after a brain injury, allowing for the brain to form new neurons and enhance cognitive function.
So let's get into the why. Why is this important for us to understand?
When I learned about neuroplasticity, I was inspired because the connections formed during the learning process provide our brains the opportunity to strengthen and adapt to how we respond to life's challenges. When our brains are empowered in this way, it promotes a sense of independence and enhances self-esteem and self-trust, not only within ourselves, but also in our involvement throughout the community. Neuroplasticity is a proactive way to maintaining our health, since we lose neuroplasticity naturally as we grow older, because we're not engaging our minds as much as we do compared to when we're younger. When we partake in experiences that encourage our bodies to heal from within, the narrative begins to change.
So let's circle back onto the mental health aspect of this. How does neuroplasticity empower those with mental health challenges in particular, specifically for those folks?
There are several biological processes that can influence the brain and its functionality when mental health conditions are present. The forms of conditions that can alter the thoughts, behaviors, actions that influence the brain in a variety of ways. For those experiencing the reality of the challenges encompassed with mental health, neuroplasticity provides hope due to the brain's resiliency and recovery potential. This returns to the varying ways that neuroplasticity can take place that we discussed earlier. This is empowering because mental health professions can utilize the principles to tailor experiences toward those in their care in order to promote positive brain function and aid in behavioral challenges that occur when mental health is compromised.
So how does this work from a time structure?
Neuroplasticity incorporates a learning process, and learning takes time. We engage in new material or experiences. We are opening up the neural pathways in our mind to begin forming connections. Through consistent application of the new learning material, the neurons in our brain become stronger. The timeline it takes to experience the effects vary from person to person, depending on the severity of the symptoms caused by mental health challenges, the types of activities that are participated in. Yet, with consistent application of the activities being learned, research states that the rewiring process of the brain can take between a couple of months to several years, depending on the severity. Yet, the immediate effects of a person's quality of life through the application of the activity and mental health engagement can be experienced through the fulfillment of tasks or a sense of purpose through the application of learning material.
So, Tessa, can you tell us what kind of limitations there might be to neuroplasticity?
Yeah, absolutely. This question was important to me to bring up during the podcast because I want to provide an opportunity to express how complex the scenarios are that affect our brain's ability to form connections. Our brains are complex, and each part of our brain carries a specific function. This can make certain recoveries impossible through neuroplasticity alone, because certain types and severity of injuries may require too large of neural network organization than neuroplasticity can achieve on its own. Additionally, neuroplasticity needs biologically available material in order to produce its healing effects, meaning some regions in the brain that are more complex and specialized, for example, neuroplasticity is unable to rewire the brain to compensate for a lack of the hippocampus, as the function in that part of the brain is not found anywhere else in the brain. In addition, neuroplasticity can cause a negative experience for those engaging in the new experiences that they're partaking in because of how experiences may bring up past traumas, since we want to work through the past in order to make new connections and how we respond to situations in the future. While the formation of new connections provides an opportunity for healing, there's an immense amount of intentionality that needs to occur when the individual goes to try and overcome their past experiences. Since the influence that certain life experiences has on our brains, some are difficult to process due to stress, anxiety, and other psychological factors, which can negatively impact the formation of new connections. Regardless of how worthwhile it may be to partake in activities that allow new connections in the brain to be formed, it is a difficult process to try and learn new things.
Interesting. What can promote neuroplasticity in our daily lives?
In order to optimize our brain function, we need to prioritize activities that are meaningful to us and to do more of it. When learning something new, there's a challenge present because we innately want to understand it. Yet that is the process of neuroplasticity, and we need to continuously practice what we are learning. Some examples of activities that can be done include listening to new music that you've never listened to, using your non-dominant hand to do everyday tasks. This can be done while brushing your teeth or stirring a pot when you're cooking, putting dishes away, during arts and crafts, drinking from a cup, doing a different form of exercise, or if you regularly exercise, doing new movements in your routine or doing some form of activity or hobby, especially ones that are exciting to you. I feel we all have different interests, and that can be, neuroplasticity is very broad. So doing a new task that puts your brain in a new scenario alone is something that can promote those neural connections to be formed. Once new hobbies or activities are established, it's important to put your full effort and attention into learning in order to maximize the connections being formed in your brain. meaning when you are doing the dishes, I know sometimes we will do many different things at once when in our lives. And so when you're doing the dishes in a different way, or putting the bowls away first instead of the plates, or some are doing an art and craft project a little bit differently than how you typically would, doing only one thing at a time. Sometimes when we are busy in our schedules, it can create a feeling of being scattered and not being able to focus. But with neuroplasticity, forming the connections, it's important to do the task that you're trying to achieve at one time.
So to wrap this up, in conclusion, how would you go back and kind of reframe everything that you just went over and give it to our listeners in a package that they can take home and make some use out of?
Absolutely. Connection is a fundamental component to our general well-being as individuals and within our communities. The connections within our brain are no different, and we need them to thrive to be able to fully engage with the world around us. When we are caring for others whose brains are compromised in some regard, whether through trauma, mental health challenges, injury, or illness, and also for those experiencing each of those things, we can utilize the power of connection to empower ourselves and those around us to immerse in the experiences that promote healing and rehabilitation from within. Through practice and new experiences, we are able to provide our brains with the opportunities it needs to heal and respond to the experiences that occur throughout our daily life, and shift the narrative that is currently experienced by our vulnerable populations. While we share the same neurological anatomy, the reality looks very different for each person. Every person's brain reacts and responds differently, but connection is able to be promoted as we empower each other throughout hardship. To overcome through the power of neuroplasticity due to the brain's ability to overcome through patience and connection.
Thank you so much, Tessa, for stopping by today and talking about a subject that not a lot of us have much basic knowledge about. And hopefully, going forward, our listeners are going to have a little bit more information about something that they never heard about before. So at this point, I'd like to say thanks all for listening, and looking forward to our next episode in advocacy and promotion of mental health awareness in the month of May 2025. Thank you.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.